Together, we will make America great again.
RPN is not responsible for the views, actions, statements, or opinions of its guests, advertisers, or even its viewers. The information contained in this program is not to be confused with medical or legal advice. An appearance on this platform is not necessarily an endorsement, but as always, we encourage you to do your own research. Enjoy the show. Good evening, everyone. And welcome back. Yes, my friends, to another very exciting episode of Red Pill News Live. Hope you guys are having a great day. Hope you had a great weekend. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Really do appreciate it. If you haven't yet, do me a favor, hit that like button. The red pill, hit the thumbs up, wherever you're at. Really do mean that I appreciate it. And I want to say thank you to K.O. Kelly. Happy anniversary, Zach and Lisa. Also, thank you to Smot Poker. Good afternoon, Patriots. Thank you for that. Well, it was just about 3 weeks ago, I think maybe 24 days or so ago, that Kristi Noem held a mysterious press conference at a secure site in Maricopa County, Arizona. And she brought all the press with her. Well, we now know that while that was going on, the FBI was secretly investigating the elections in Arizona. 2020, 2022, 2024, and it all has been revealed. I've got an affidavit, which is one of these numerous instances of irregularities taking place in Maricopa County that the FBI is directly investigating. There was also a number of terror attacks over the weekend. Not successful, but we are going to talk about those. And so much more. So do me a favor, hit that like button. Help us out by sharing the show. Sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn. We're going to be right back after this. So new inflation numbers are out of Washington, and it shows that once again, inflation is on the rise. That's another threat to you, another threat to your savings account, and of course, also your retirement. So you got to ask yourself an honest question here. Does your dollar go as far today as it did 10 years ago? Well, what about 5 years ago, even last year? Then what does the next decade look like for you and your savings? Because if your portfolio lacks exposure to gold, one of history's most reliable economic hedges, it's about time to rethink your strategy. Because gold has kept up with inflation, and in many periods, it's actually outpaced it. My friends at Noble Gold Investments specialize in helping people protect their wealth using physical gold and silver. Whether you're going to roll over an IRA or make a direct purchase, their team walks you through the entire process, and they make it super simple. There's no pressure, just education and experience. And right now, all new qualified accounts are going to receive a free 1/10 of an ounce America Gold Eagle as a thank you. To find out, you can visit noblegoldinvestments.com/redpill78 and discover just how easy it is to protect your financial future. Once again, that's noblegoldinvestments.com/redpill78. And when you support my sponsors, you support this channel. All right, my friends, welcome back and thank you for joining us. We do have one additional sponsor I must give a shout out to before we get into all of the various news. First of all, parents, right now we have a serious conversation I want to have with you. America is about to hit a major milestone. We're coming up on our 250th birthday. As you know, that is 250 years of freedom, grit, sacrifice, and the greatest experiment in self-governance the world has ever seen. This is the perfect time to help your kids understand why this country matters, not just the fireworks and the hot dogs, but the story behind it all. And there is a free guide called The Kid's Guide to America's 250th Birthday. It's honestly a great way to introduce your children or your grandchildren to how America began, who the founding fathers were, what they risked, and why the ideas they fought for still matter today. This kid's guide takes your kids and sends them back to the moment when those brave men signed the Declaration of Independence. They knew full well at that time that they were risking their lives for freedom. It breaks it all down in a way that is very easy to understand and enjoy. It doesn't water it down or turn it into boring schoolwork. So if you care about raising kids who know where this country came from, and most importantly, why it's still worth fighting for today and preserving, this is something that you're going to want to grab. And the best part, it's completely free with this special offer. All you do is pay $2 for shipping and handling. The best part is that you can also pick it up at freeusabirthday.com. That is freeusabirthday.com. Head on over there, and the Kid's Guide to America's 250th birthday is available right now for your kids today. America's story matters. Make sure that the next generation knows it. All right. Thank you very much to everyone who does support the show. I really do appreciate it. And let's go ahead and dive right into our first story. You know, I'm not like a sports guy. I don't really follow anything related to sports. There's a lot of guys out there who do. Most often, I just kind of feel like it's bread and circus. But I saw this clip this morning, and it was probably the greatest race that I have ever seen, the biggest comeback from behind. This was from the Los Angeles Marathon that took place over the weekend. A Kenyan by the name of Michael Kimani Kamau was about to win this race, and an American came in from behind. Now, what's even cooler about it is that this guy is from my home state. He's from Jackson, Michigan. The LA Marathon is a 26.2-mile race, and this guy, Kamau, was in the lead for quite some time, but at the very last second, our man from America came in and quite literally stole the show. He won by 0.01 seconds. Let me go ahead and play this for you because it is extremely awesome.
Wow, look at that. Oh, no,
all right.
She missed it by 2 seconds. He ran 2:25.17 in at the Marathon Project, and she missed her PR.
Nowhere
by
to
2
be
seconds.
seen. Kenyan
Okay,
in the lead.
how close is Michael from here? Is he within eyesight from us?
He's in the last, I don't know. Here
Here he comes.
he comes right now.
And
he
here
so
comes
let's get
the
right
winner.
Back down to the finish line so we can watch Michael cross the line here.
This guy
Michael
in
Kamau
front thinks
from
he has
Kenya.
it in the bag.
Over 2 hours and 11 minutes on the clock.
And the American runner, literally, by the skin of his teeth, push it, push it, push it, push it. Ah! The guy just drops to the ground, collapses in a heap
finish for crowning of the
tragedy,
2026 A6 LA
in a
Marathon.
heap of regret. He's thinking to himself, why didn't I save that last bit of energy for the very end? Of course, he never, ever possibly contemplated that this man was going to come in from behind out of nowhere and steal his glory.
Champion.
What does he do?
I'm not sure.
Drapes
Nowhere,
himself
'cause we can
in an
only see
American
just a little
flag,
bit beyond.
We have
does
to
not
see that
drop to his
playback to see
knees,
exactly what
stands
happened there because
after
he
running
crossed first, right?
all of those miles.
I think he did. I think he crossed first.
Here comes Kellen Taylor.
Oh.
Second place finish on the women's side.
Absolutely incredible. Oh, I just loved seeing that. I thought it was so cool. All right. Anyways, the winner of the race is Nathan Martin. Congratulations to Nathan Martin, USA all the way. Wanted to give him a big shout out because I thought that was super freaking cool. All right, moving on to our next story, but let me say thank you to Filter Dog. One hell of a Monday. Let's kick it off. All right, I wanted to give you guys a moment of zen. Last week, I reported that thousands of Somali migrants had been deported back to their home dirt patch in Africa, and I wanted to make sure you guys were still aware that despite the fact DHS, ICE, and CBP are still not funded, they refuse to stop deporting Somalis from Minneapolis. You can see here, we've got yet another flight where people are being loaded up on their way back to Somalia and all points in between. Who knows exactly where these guys are from, but I'll tell you one thing, they're not American and they're not going to stay here in our nation any longer. So enjoy that moment of zen. We continue to deport on a daily basis. All right, now, last week, I also mentioned a whistleblower from Minneapolis, Minnesota DHS whistleblower, woman by the name of Faye Bernstein. Faye Bernstein, who I follow on X because she was calling out Tim Walz. Tim Walz, who said he's never heard of her. Of course, he definitely has, and she wanted to make sure that he was aware. Well, they've called her in to testify, and she testified early this morning in Minnesota in regards to all of the fraud that we're seeing. So I thought we would check in and see just the first portion of her testimony.
Nstein. I first want to just make a comment on the report and say the word that I think no one from DHS wants to hear again, but that's retaliation, the R word. I am a 20-year employee. I'm a current employee of DHS, and I am one of the very, very few DHS employees who can publicly speak about what the environment is there. We have a very large group. You probably have heard about the large group of employees who anonymously tweet and anonymously work with law enforcement and the OLA, et cetera. I have chosen to be public. I think it has certainly harmed me professionally, personally. It has harmed me in many ways to be public, but I feel like we have to just openly speak about the conditions at the Department of Human Services.
Now, we know all about the conditions at the Department of Human Services. It is a morass of fraud, waste, and abuse. And Miss Bernstein, unfortunately, has paid the price through that retaliation from her superiors, many of them hailing from Somalia at the end of the day. Now, I wanted to give her a shout out for her bravery coming forward and putting a face and a name to those faceless bureaucrats who have discovered this fraud and done everything within their power to try to bring it to the American people and stop it from taking place anymore. Let me tell you the most egregious part of this hearing. This fraud hearing took place first thing this morning in Minneapolis. And everybody who was there, you can take a look at the table. All right, there's a bunch of empty seats. And do you know who belongs in each of those empty seats? That would be a Democrat who sits on this committee. The only people who showed up to hear Ms. Bernstein speak about this fraud, anybody, there was a number of people who testified, including former state legislators who also had previously tried to blow the whistle on this fraud in years past. The only people who showed up were the Republicans on the committee. The Democrats failed to show their faces, but they did make sure they showed up a little bit later in the day for the Ways and Means Committee when it was time to ask for more money. You've got to be kidding me. These people have no shame. They refuse to accept that they have allowed the situation in Minnesota to devolve to the place that it has. One of the other things that was testified to was that the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport exports more money out of the United States than every other airport in the United States combined. The amount of fraud, waste, and abuse in the state of Minnesota is unparalleled. All right. Now, President Trump had said previously, we're probably going to find even more when we get to California. You know, there's more people in California, certainly. But there's just as many opportunities for fraud. But there isn't this insular community of people who have come to the United States of America, not assimilated, and then used their positions to commit the widest, largest mass-scale fraud in American history, and then send a significant portion of that money back home. Of course, after they buy luxury homes, multi-million-dollar cars, Fendi, Gucci, and Louis Vuitton bags for their ladies, and of course, the nicest burqas that you can possibly buy. I mean, I don't know how expensive those are. I mean, black fabric, how crazy is that going to end up being at the end of the day? But I'm sure they make designer burqas that these ladies are wearing around. Anyways, also wanted to tip you off to this tweet from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, an illegal alien who was also here voting fraudulently. Last week, we learned about a Canadian who was living in, I believe, North Carolina. He'd been voting for the last 25 years. The guy didn't know he wasn't an American citizen. His parents brought him here when he was just 3 years old. He's been living here the entire time, been voting the entire time. And so maybe I give that guy a pass, but there is a certain amount of due diligence, I suppose, that should have come across his desk over the years. I mean, at a certain point, you'd think that his parents would have said, you, sir, are still a citizen of Canada. There's a reason that you don't have certain privileges afforded to you because you're not an American citizen. But the guy voted. They're going to send him back to Canada. Good riddance to bad rubbish. I love my Canadian patriot brothers and sisters up north, but I would never go to Canada and try to vote in your elections. And I'm sure that you wouldn't come to America and vote in our elections. But here we have yet another illegal alien, this time from Mauritania, Mahdi Sacco. He was arrested for committing voter fraud in the 2024 election. He also falsely claimed he had United States citizenship. Once again, all the more reasons that we should have the SAVE Act and many other pieces of legislation and election security matters passed here in the United States. I'd also like to take you to Pennsylvania, thanks in large part to President Trump and the USDA's new regulations on SNAP benefits, meaning that if you want to collect SNAP benefits, you also have to be working, or not even working. You could volunteer someplace for 20 hours a week, and that way you get to keep your SNAP benefits. Well, guess what? I guess the people of Pennsylvania, and of course that's none of you here, but these people in Pennsylvania who are taking advantage of the system, rather than working, they would simply just not collect SNAP benefits. We've now had 59,578 people in the state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, just decide we're no longer going to bother collecting SNAP benefits because it would be too much of a burden to either volunteer or work a part-time job 20 hours a week. They would rather remain in poverty rather than lift themselves out of poverty. It says a lot. One state, 6 months, nearly 60,000 people. Let's take a listen.
Well, in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, they have got 59,500 people who've lost their federal food assistance, like their SNAP benefits.
Holy shit. That's just in Harrisburg. That's even worse. Pennsylvania, what are you guys doing?
Where they can apply and get a debit card and go pay for their food. Now, why have they lost their federal food assistance? And this is just in the last 6 months this has happened. Over 59,000 people in just 6 months because they put work requirements on it. People say, oh, no, I'm not going to work. If I got to work for it, I'll just do without, because there ain't no way I'm going to go to work. Now, I'm telling you, I think we'll put work requirements on everything. You either ought to be in a job training program, you ought to be helping with daycares for other people who are going to work. Whenever you put work requirements of welfare to work, I'm telling you, it drastically reduces the burden on the taxpayer.
Yeah, that's so obvious. At this point, I don't know why it isn't on everything, but the fact that we are changing things is obviously very, very good. Much, much better. Now, it's with a heavy heart I must announce that yet another American soldier has succumbed to his injuries from Operation Epic Fury, this time a 26-year-old sergeant by the name of Benjamin Pennington. He was wounded in the same blast, I believe, that killed the other 6 soldiers. And he has now had his next of kin notified of his passing. So this will mark the 7th reported U.S. service member who has died since the start of hostilities in Iran. He was 26 years old, and he died from his wounds following an attack on U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia on March 1st. CENTCOM made the announcement. Last night, a U.S. service member passed away from injuries received during the Iranian regime's initial attacks across the Middle East. The service member was seriously wounded at the scene of an attack on U.S. troops in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on March 1st. This will be the 7th member killed in action during Operation Epic Fury. Major combat operations continue. The identity of the fallen warrior will be withheld until 24 hours until after next of kin notification. So, as far as I know, there are no other U.S. soldiers that are wounded so gravely that we should see anyone else from that initial barrage of attacks being announced as having passed away. But it also could be that they just haven't announced that anybody is that bad off. So I'll just ask you to continue to pray that nobody else loses their life and that we can bring this to a swift conclusion. We do have some new quotes from President Trump on that a little bit later in the show. All right, now over the weekend, my buddy Jake Lang hosted an anti-Islamic rally in New York City, just outside of Mayor Zoran Mamdani's home. And while he and other patriots were out there, there was also a counter protest that was made up of radical left-wing Antifa types. And there were a couple of ISIS-inspired bombers that happened to be there, and they threw 2 homemade bombs. Now, thankfully, both of them failed to detonate, but they were both loaded with a deadly explosive known as TATP, triacetone tripexaride, also known as Mother of Satan. Now, this is apparently a favorite tool used by Islamic terrorists, and the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force took over the investigation from the NYPD, which means that this moves from a state to a federal case. 1 bomb was thrown at the rally at Gracie Mansion while Jake Lang was essentially standing right next to it. The suspect yelled Allahu Akbar when the bomb was thrown, and then the second bomb was dropped after it was ignited, and the police began to pursue the suspect. Both bombs were thrown by the same individual, but there were 2 individuals that were present at the scene. You can see here the young man who was responsible for this, and then there at the feet of the police, you can see the bomb has been ignited, but for whatever reason, both of them did not go off. Now, these 2 men that were arrested are from Pennsylvania. They're rather young. Emir Bala, 18, and Ibrahim Kayumi, 19. They were arrested at the scene. Both men self-identified as self-radicalized supporters of ISIS. They confessed pretty quickly to the bombings. They had recently reportedly traveled to the Middle East. And I have some still images of the actual moment that they're throwing this stuff. Also, a video. It's absolutely insane to see it taking place. Let me show you this. Well, but first of all, I want to show you how the New York Times reported on this. When this initially took place, I mean, there's really no other way you can state it. You got a couple of homemade Islamists. They immediately pledged support for ISIS. They made bombs. If those bombs would have gone off, there was like the explosive was inside a Gatorade bottle, which was inside of a glass jar, which was wrapped in tape, which was surrounded by like nails and shrapnel and stuff. It didn't go off, and if it had gone off, it would have been extremely deadly. It probably would have maimed a whole lot of people. There were police, there were protesters that were right there. I mean, it was absolutely insane. So when they reported on this, the headline said, "Smoking jars of metal and fuses thrown at protest near mayor's house." Smoking jars of metal and fuses is, if only there was another word for that. Oh, yeah, that's right. It's called a bomb. It's called an effing bomb. Well, they got a lot of flack for that headline, and they eventually did change it to homemade bomb thrown at protest, but it's actually homemade bombs thrown at protest near the NYC's mayor house, police say. But that's, of course, the New York Times for you. An improvised explosive device, a bomb, whatever you want to call it, okay? I mean, like, there's a couple of other things that you can call it. Now, these are the still images where you can see that this guy has a lighter. He's holding on to this homemade bomb right there. And he is about to light it and then throw it. Here are the police jumping over the barricade. I believe this is actually a single image, but because the person taking the picture was moving at the time, you've got like 3 or 4 different exposures of the cop as he's jumping over the barricade right there. Here is another one as the man is filmed running from the scene immediately after lighting the bomb. This is his accomplice in the background. He's holding on to the second bomb. the moment that he does it, and then immediately runs. Thank God these things did not go off. Let me now show you a video from the moment he threw the first bomb. The irony of this is that you've got this left-wing protester who is essentially calling out on this loudspeaker saying, we want everybody to stay in New York. So he's extolling the virtues of mass immigration at the exact same moment that this kid yells Allahu Akbar and throws the bomb over his head. So he totally would have killed this left-wing protester. That ought to tell you something. They don't give two shits about ideology or who you are. You can be on their side and you will just as easily be cannon fodder. I'm going to have to refresh.
We were born and raised in New York, and we want everyone here to stay in New York. You don't get to come from outside and then tell everyone else.
And this dope, this dope just stands there, like zero sense of self-preservation. That's called suicidal empathy right there. Here's a still image as he's essentially launching off the back of this left-wing protester. And then here's the kid throwing the other bomb. Here he is lighting it, casually standing on the sidewalk, just lighting an IED. Hey, what's up, gang? Follow my kick. Follow my Instagram. Boom. Now, good news. They got him right away. And once the FBI took over, they took possession of these little rugrats, and they essentially took over the investigation from the NYPD, which means that the corrupt SDNY, or the corrupt New York City prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, is not going to be able to give these guys a sweetheart deal or, give them any sort of a plea deal or anything. So earlier today, the FBI conducted court-ordered raids in Pennsylvania, which is where these kids are from. The authorities launched these court-ordered raids after this violent protest in New York City over the weekend. These two Muslim teen extremists hurled those improvised explosive devices during a protest outside of Gracie Mansion. The chaos unfolded when 18-year-old Amir Balat and 19-year-old Ibrahim Nick allegedly launched these homemade bombs, and their target was, in fact, Jake Lang and the people that he was protesting with. Now, why is TATP called the mother of Satan? Well, it's extremely volatile, and it can detonate with minimal disturbance, and it typically doesn't even require a fuse to explode. So the fact that this guy both lit and threw, and you could hear in that second video, the glass actually shattered. So the fact that neither of them went off is pretty incredible. Basically, it's a miracle. Now, the police are saying that if these bombs had gone off, very easily could have killed and, at the very least, seriously maimed people that were in the crowd. Now, the devices themselves are being analyzed by the FBI at Quantico, Virginia. Specialists are working to determine the exact composition and origin. And there was also a third device that was found yesterday after the initial devices were thrown, and this appeared to be another IED that was placed in a vehicle that was very close to this scene. So the bomb squad was called in, and they went and were able to get this device. Of course, that one did not blow up as well.
Avenue between 81st Street and 82nd Street, we have been told that officers have located a third suspicious device in a car that is thought to belong to one of two suspects who were taken into custody yesterday in connection with two other suspicious devices. So now we've got a total of 3 suspicious devices that have been uncovered here in the Big Apple. And we know at this point from high-level sources and from the NYPD that at least one of the devices that has been confiscated is a confirmed IED. Fox has been talking to high-level sources all throughout the day, and we actually learned today that one of the IEDs that was taken into custody yesterday had an explosive called triacetone triperoxide.
All right, so mass chaos yesterday in New York, or over the weekend. I mean, it was a continued chaos for quite some time. Now, when the police went to the homes of these individuals, it turns out that they lived in a very swanky part of Pennsylvania. Bucks County, Pennsylvania. FBI agents raided the homes of both of these young men, and the FBI has now officially launched a terrorism investigation, in large part because at least one of the subjects referenced ISIS in the statement they made to law enforcement. The 2 men, Pkwy and Balat, handled and deployed the 2 explosive devices when they were counter-protesters confronting conservative influencer Jake Lang. It was called the Stop Islamic Takeover of New York City, Stop New York City Public Muslim Prayer protest. The police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, said that Balat threw the explosive device right near Gracie Mansion, causing flames and smoke to travel through the air before hitting a barrier. Mr. Balat lights the device, starts running with it. He then drops the device after the first explosive device was thrown. Tisch said that Balat ran to grab a second explosive device from Pkwy. However, Balat was unable to throw the second device as they were taken into custody on scene. Overall, 6 people were arrested on Saturday. 4 arrested, not in connection with the explosions. Now, I want to show you the neighborhood that these kids lived in, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. They lived in a 2.5, or at least one of them lived in a $2.5 million mansion. This doesn't exactly seem like the home of, the likely home of a homegrown terrorist, but of course, I guess maybe there's a first time for everything.
Massive federal response unfolded tonight in 2 neighborhoods across Bucks County as the FBI launches a terrorism investigation into 2 men accused of throwing explosive devices at a counter-protest in New York.
Look at that home. Look at that beautiful palatial mansion that this kid lived in. Wait until you hear his history. You're going to be so pissed.
New York City. The terrorism investigation now underway in Bucks County. Federal agents descended on the homes of 2 young men earlier tonight, taking several more people into custody. Now,
so we don't know exactly who was taken into custody at their homes, but I can only imagine it was members of their family.
The FBI is confirming one of the devices thrown during yesterday's counter-protest in New York City was a homemade bomb. Action News reporter Brianna Smith joins us live from Newtown with more on the latest developments.
This is the other part, like the morons who were on site filming everything, like they got right up on top of those IEDs and they were filming them. Like, bruh, like just because it hasn't gone off yet doesn't mean it's not going to go off. Like it's probably the stupidest thing. And I'm sure everybody was like, oh my God, this is going to get so many hits. I can't wait to sell this to the mainstream media. I can't wait to put this out on my social media. I'm going to get so many followers.
Brianna.
Walter, the NYPD says the 2 men from Bucks County were arrested on Saturday and remain in custody as the FBI launches a terrorism investigation. Now, earlier this evening, the FBI blocked off Clymer Street to raid.
Look at that fucking house. Pardon my language, but look at that house. This is like a 5,000 square foot mansion.
That house where one of the suspects live, and as you can see, law enforcement remains here at this hour.
Oh, I'll tell you who funded them. That's why you're going to be pissed.
Descended on the homes of 2 men from Bucks County on Sunday evening. This after the NYPD says they deployed at least 1 improvised explosive device during a dueling protest in New York City on Saturday. Other devices are under investigation.
Nothing like this happens around here, so it's pretty scary.
Residents watch.
They're like, let's make sure we interview the white woman because this is not supposed to happen in Bucks County.
Watched as law enforcement searched the home of 19-year-old Ibrahim Pkwy in Newtown. They say they saw agents put a male into this white van.
Coming out with his arms up and then handcuffed and put into the van.
insane.
Come out through the front door, which is in the
Action News captured this video of agents at 18-year-old Amir Balat's house in Langhorne. Police tell Action News 2 males and a female were taken into custody. On Saturday,
Probably his mom, maybe his dad and his brother. We'll find out.
the suspects were arrested outside the New York City mayor's house. That's where far-right activist Jake Lang held an anti-Islam protest.
Got
The
thrown right
NYPD
at Jake's
says
feet,
Balat
and he and his people ran
confronted Lang
immediately.
in a counter-protest where they handled and deployed the 2 explosive devices.
So lucky it didn't go off.
Reported seeing flames and smoke as it traveled through the air before it struck a barrier and extinguished itself a few feet from police officers.
Sources tell ABC News the men told investigators they watched ISIS videos, and now their protest is being investigated as a possible act of terrorism.
That's what scares me, to know that it could have been made right there in their home, a home across the street from our homes.
The NYPD says another suspicious device found in a vehicle on East End Avenue between 81st and 82nd Streets on Sunday is now being investigated as part of the case.
I'm pretty sure they have connected that car to those guys. All right, now, this is where you're going to be pissed. So these ISIS radicalized American teens of Muslim faith are of Afghanistani descent. At least one of them was. The one who lived in the 5,800 square foot mansion in Newtown, Pennsylvania, with 6 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms. His parents are naturalized citizens from Afghanistan. So they fled their war-torn country seeking the safety and opportunity that America provides, and they obviously got rich. Now, we don't know how they got rich, but of course, they came to America with the help of the American taxpayer. Their son, who you see right here, this one, he's the one who lived in that 5,800 square foot home with his parents. And now he's probably going to have his parents being arrested and maybe denaturalized and sent back to Afghanistan. I don't know that their parents or the families are guilty in any respect, but this just goes to show you that there is no good reason to just allow anybody into our country. You can be as nice as you want to be. You can give everybody every single advantage that you would otherwise be giving to American citizens. And yet still, they're going to grow up in the lap of luxury and then turn on the nation that harbored and gave them safety. Absolutely insane. So anyways, for some reason, he hates the new life that his parents gave him, and he decided instead to embrace the ideology of ISIS. Cyrus says, I don't really like Jake Lang's methods, but these 2 terrorists just proved his point. I'm with you. You know, I mean, Jake's been a friend of mine for a long time, but I don't necessarily care for the way that he does things all the time. But no, he's absolutely right. I mean, this is the shit that he's been talking about. And here we go. They just made his point for them. So, obviously they have essentially sunk any hope of people looking at random Islamists on the street and thinking like, oh, yeah, they're probably not here to kill us. So anyways, we do also have the indictment. The FBI has released it. AG Bondi has charged Amir Balat and Ibrahim Kayumi with attempted provision of material support and resources to a designated foreign terrorist organization. These are Gitmo charges right here. Use of a weapon of mass destruction, transportation of explosive materials, interstate transportation and receipt of explosives, unlawful possession of destructive devices. So let's take a look here. Charged out of the Southern District of New York. Count 1. On or about March 2026, the Southern District of New York and elsewhere, Amir Balat and Ibrahim Kayumi, the defendants, knowingly attempted to provide material support or resources, as that term is defined in Title 18 U.S. Code, Section 2339A-B, including personnel to wit themselves and services to a foreign terrorist organization, to wit ISIS, which at all relevant times has been designated by the U.S. Secretary of State as a foreign terrorist organization pursuant to Section 219 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, and is currently designated as such by the filing of this complaint, knowing that ISIS was a designated foreign terrorist organization as defined by Title 18 U.S. Code, Section 2339 BG6 ISIS engages in and has engaged in terrorist activity, and that ISIS engages in and has engaged in terrorism of the Foreign Relations Authorized Act, fiscal years 1988 and 1989. Count 2, use of a weapon of mass destruction with knowledge and unlawful and acting without lawful authority. They knowingly used, threatened, and attempted to use a weapon of mass destruction, namely the explosive device that we showed. Count 3, in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere, Amir and Ibrahim not being licensed or permittees under the provisions of Chapter 40 of Title 18 of the U.S. Code, knowingly transported these explosive materials. Count 4, they knowingly transported and received and attempted to transport and receive in interstate and foreign commerce an explosive with the knowledge and the intent it would be used to kill, injure, and intimidate any individual and unlawfully damage and destroy a building, vehicle, or other real personal property. Also, count 5, which is unlawful possession of destructive devices. They knowingly possessed the firearm, namely a combination of parts designed and intended for use in converting devices into destructive devices per the relevant U.S. statutes. All right. And then they essentially go into the summary of the investigation, where the defendants attempted to detonate the explosives at the protest. They tested the devices and found the presence of TATP. The New York Police Department arrested them at the scene. They both immediately made statements referring to ISIS. Pkwy was being placed into his NYPD vehicle to be transported. And as Pkwy was being placed, an individual from the crowd yelled to Pkwy and asked in substance and in part why had he done this. Pkwy responded in part and as captured on body cam footage, ISIS. Balat and Pkwy also referred to ISIS in recorded post-arrest statements they made after receiving and waiving their Miranda rights. More specifically, Balat wrote a piece on a piece of paper that he had pledged allegiance to the Islamic State, and Pkwy stated in substance and in part that he was affiliated with ISIS, watched ISIS propaganda on his phone, and was partly inspired to carry out his actions that day by ISIS. Balat additionally stated that they wanted to carry out an action bigger than the Boston Marathon bombing, which Balat noted caused only 3 deaths. All right. Couple of nice boys. You never expected to see it. They were always so good to their mothers. Anyways, in addition to arresting these two turd heels, the FBI, of course, was able to confiscate their phones, and I'm sure they are currently going through all of their online accounts. 0 Hour 1 has reported that United States has seized encrypted messages to terrorists in the United States. Expect to see unexpected arrests all over the country. NSA is on the hunt. There was also a report that Iran had apparently sent out word that any cells they had in the West were meant to be activated so that attacks like these would take place. I can't say with any certainty whether or not these guys had a connection to Iran, but obviously ISIS, Islamic terrorism, all the shit goes hand in hand. So looking forward to seeing what gets shaken up over the course of the next week. Now, we also had a terror attack at the U.S. Embassy in Oslo. There was a large explosion there as well. No injuries were recorded, but Norwegian police are definitely calling it a deliberate attack. The U.S. Embassy in Oslo was hit by a loud explosion overnight. That would have been Friday night. Norwegian police said the incident may be linked to the Middle East crisis. I would say that that's probably a safe bet. Let's go ahead and take a look here. Looks like you had some Antifa types that were milling around outside of the embassy. It's natural to see this in the context of the current security situation, Reuters reported, and that this could be an attack deliberately targeting the U.S. Embassy. No suspects have been identified at present. However, that has now changed. We have an image of who they believe actually threw the explosive device. Now, the U.S. Treasury Department has commented because there are serious concerns about operations in Norway which contain Iranian agents, and they have been allegedly placed within Scandinavian gangs. Now, there is a gang apparently known as Foxtrot, which has been sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department for using teenagers to hurl hand grenades at the Israeli embassy on Iranian orders. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control sanctioned the Foxtrot Network, a transnational criminal organization primarily based in Sweden that has trafficked illicit drugs and carried out attacks on Israelis and Jews in Europe, along with its fugitive leader, Rawa Majid. In January 2024, the Foxtrot Network orchestrated an attack on the Israeli embassy in Stockholm, Sweden, on behalf of the government of Iran. Now, you may or may not be surprised to learn that there are bombings in Sweden all the time. This is a relatively new phenomenon, but it's directly connected to the number of Islamists that they have imported into their nation. It's completely incompatible with the forward-thinking, liberal, socialist government of Sweden. But unfortunately, they continue to bring these monsters in. Now, here is pictures that have been released from the Norwegian police. These are from surveillance footage of the suspect. You can actually see he's a white kid. Looks like perhaps a native Swede, and he's got something in his hand right here, most likely wearing a backpack, which is what we see in the second picture right there. Again, as far as I know, no names have been released, but we obviously have a terrorism problem that is shaken out all over the world. Now, there was also a bit of a false alarm in Kansas City over the weekend. Allegedly, there was a bomb threat, and all flight traffic was grounded. Of course, it couldn't come at a worse time because the TSA is currently not funded, as the bill to get DHS funding is still not passing through the U.S. Congress. So as a result, lines of up to 3 hours are forming and stopping people from being able to catch their flights. This is bad for me personally because I have a flight to catch next month to Nashville, and I'm starting to second guess my plan, which would be to drive there very early in the morning. I might need to actually go there the night before just to make sure that I can make it through TSA. We'll see if all of this stuff is still going on, but airports across the country are currently in disarray thanks to the shutdown of DHS. The 3-hour wait times seem to be absolutely out of control. That also appears to be one of the better examples of wait times. You can see here, this airport TSA line stretches out into the parking area. You know, you show up to an airport and there's a line like that, I'd probably just turn around and cancel my flight. There's no way that I would be waiting that long for TSA. I just don't think that I would be willing to do that. All right. Now, we are now going to talk about what happened in Arizona. This, of course, coming from Just the News and our man John Solomon. Now, you'll remember 24 days ago or so, Kristi Noem had held a Save America Act press conference in Maricopa. I said at the time, well, I had actually heard before Kristi Noem holding that press conference that was going to be an FBI raid. Well, it turned out not to be a raid per se, but it does appear to have been a cover operation. So when we reported on this initially, it was stated that Kristi Noem and also DNI Gabbard was there, much like in Fulton County, Georgia. They brought the press to a secure facility, a skiff, in the middle of nowhere. They didn't let anybody know where they were taking them, and they brought them, and then they just gave this like cheer rally telling the press that we needed to get the Save America Act passed, and they were standing in front of election materials. Now, the press seemed to be a little bit confused as they were listening to Kristi Noem. You know, like, why do this here? Why are we doing this here? Well, the answer to that is because they didn't want the press anywhere near where they were going to be collecting the real investigative materials. So it does appear that the FBI is now expanding their criminal probe into suspected election irregularities. And we know there are irregularities abounding in the state of Arizona. They secretly obtained a large tranche of voting records from Arizona's largest county. And the way they did it is different than they did in Fulton County, Georgia. Now, in Fulton County, Georgia, they applied for a warrant based upon a series of statements in their probable cause affidavit. In the state of Arizona, they held a secret grand jury. So they had a grand jury subpoena, and they were able to use that to go in. And the people in Maricopa County could not say anything about it. There are, however, sources who spoke on condition of anonymity to Just the News because it was a secret grand jury. No one is allowed to discuss it. FBI agents were able to go in on that day and get a whole bunch of information. And since that time, they have been receiving terabytes of election fraud data coming out of Maricopa County. This, of course, just a month after the Bureau first disclosed there was even an investigation into election irregularities after raiding that warehouse in Fulton County, Arizona. There, of course, they seized ballots and all election-related materials from the 2020 election. The subpoena comes 5 years, of course, after the GOP-led Arizona State Senate conducted a lengthy investigation of their own into the 2020 election, and they, of course, concluded at the time that there were significant irregularities. Now, the Senate President of the Arizona State Senate, Warren Peterson, confirmed earlier today that he was a recipient of a subpoena for those 2020 election records. He said, late last week, I received and complied with a federal grand jury subpoena for records relating to Arizona State Senate's 2020 audit of Maricopa County. The FBI has the records. Now, I'm sure everyone here is familiar that the FBI investigation, as it is ongoing, there is very little that can be said. But Just the News was told that the Bureau has received data under subpoena for multiple elections. That is not simply 2020, but 2020. 2022, and of course, 2024. Now, more recently, the Bureau was alerted to a report that was filed by Republican and Democrat election observers. They believed they observed irregularities in November of 2024 at a warehouse in Arizona where ballots are filled out and absentee blank ballots are held. They were, however, observed in the exact same location, and that is not supposed to happen. It seemed to indicate to both the Democrat and Republican observers that a blank ballot could then simply be filled out and inserted into the already filled out ballots, which, of course, is a crime if it was to happen. But until it's proven to be a crime through investigation, the best we can say is that it's an irregularity. And of course, irregularities are something that the mainstream media will very likely try to gloss over. Now, Congress has never released that report from those staffers. They were sent there by Congress to observe the 2024 election in Maricopa County. That's obviously where Phoenix sits. That's the largest city in the state of Arizona. But the House Administration Committee Chairman, Brian Stile, has recently hinted at the significance of the report. He gave an interview to Just the News, and he said, we're digging back through those reports that were submitted by our election observers, and they were deployed all across the country, not simply to Maricopa County, but probably everywhere we saw fraud taking place in the 2020 election. This is where working hand in glove with other federal government agencies is so important, Brian Stile said. We have reports documenting instances that occurred in Arizona and across the country, and we are reviewing those in real time and working hand in glove with federal partners to make sure that the law was followed in every jurisdiction in the country. We know that it wasn't. Now, the sources said the joint report filed by one GOP and one Democratic observer who were in Maricopa County on election night in 2024 included photos of the ballots and the storage facility, which they described as heavily guarded and having ballots from multiple states' elections. I bet you that was a facility that was owned and operated by Runbeck Election Services because, of course, Runbeck Election Services was contracted to print the ballots in both Arizona and Georgia. I would hazard a guess and say they may be filling out ballots from other places, or it could just be that this Maricopa County warehouse is a repository of sorts for fraudulent ballots to many different states. Who knows? These people are diabolical. Now, officials said that that report was one of several foundations for the FBI subpoena they executed in recent days. And sources say the FBI is likely to execute searches and subpoena in other states beyond Georgia and Arizona in the coming weeks. My friends, it's happening. It is finally happening. Now, the Bureau, of course, is going to be coy about the full extent of their probe. They don't want to give it away before it's time, but the unsealed affidavit from its raid on Fulton County's election center made it quite clear the Bureau is looking at possible violations of federal laws that require election administrators to follow state laws when sending out and counting ballots. FBI Special Agent Hugh Raymond Evans told the court that the Bureau has substantiated some major irregularities in how votes were counted in Georgia's largest urban area in the aftermath of the 2020 election, and it's probing whether those failures were intentional efforts to violate federal election law. Some of those allegations have been disproven, while some of those allegations have been substantiated, including through admission by Fulton County, Evans wrote. We read the entirety of that here on the show. This warrant application is part of an FBI criminal investigation into whether any of the improprieties were intentional acts that violated federal criminal laws. Now, many of the substantiated allegations in Fulton County have been previously reported on by places like Just the News, myself, and many other outlets over the course of the last 5 years. Concerns about elections counting in Arizona and specifically Maricopa County actually stretch back more than a decade because the state moved to mostly mail-in ballots. Back in the early days, Democrats were the ones who were complaining most of the time, but most recently seems like Republicans, our man Donald Trump, former gubernatorial and Senate candidate Kari Lake, and now U.S. Representative Abe Hamada have all raised concerns about the state's ballot distribution and counting systems. And the Arizona Senate, of course, conducted that massive audit after the 2020 election and concluded there were, in fact, irregularities. They stopped short of blaming anybody of any actual crimes. One of the Senate's most stunning findings, however, was an estimate that more than 200,000 ballots with mismatched signatures may have been counted without being reviewed. I remember watching a video showing y'all right here on the show of that guy just hitting enter, 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 when he was supposed to be doing the signature matching. There was no checks or balances that were happening at that moment. They were just allowing them to go through, curing them without actually checking them. More than 8 times the 25,000 signature mismatches requiring curing that had been acknowledged by the county. They just ignored the law. Now, the audit did little to resolve any of the disputes that we had at that time. Democrats and Maricopa County officials argue that the concerns are overblown, but Republicans say that we believe there was fraud that was taking place, and we believe we could prove it at that time. It just so happens that it was going to take 5 years for that proof to be able to get into the hands of people who had the willingness to execute upon the laws of the United States of America. Those clashes still continue. That's why a lot of people are worried about the 2026 election. Also, I've told you multiple times recently about the current Maricopa County election recorder, Justin Heap. The Board of Supervisors and he have feuded at various times, basically since he came into office, because he made it very clear that he was not going to allow this to happen in 2026. He also made it very clear he wanted to get to the bottom of what happened in past elections. Now, there is also litigation going on. The Phoenix-based board of Maricopa County passed a new draft of a shared services agreement last April. It's a formal contract that details exactly how the recorder's office and the board will perform election administrative duties under Arizona law. But Heap, after getting this SSA agreement, made 170 different changes to it and then sent it back to the board. He said, hey, this is my final order. Heap and the board, however, could not come to an agreement on the SSA, so he was forced to file a lawsuit against the board 2 months later. Heap says the lawsuit seeks to reclaim the legal authority afforded to the county recorder under Arizona law and ensure that his office is not further deprived of the resources necessary to perform those duties to the fullest extent possible. But regardless of that, on February 17th, the board passed a new SSA. This new SSA permitted Heap to have full control over early voting plans, but it left in the hands of the board control over funding, staffing, contracts, and election day operations. Well, you can say whatever you want, but if the people allegedly working for you that are being chosen by somebody else want to do everything in their power to undermine your authority, they are probably going to be successful in doing so. Since Mr. Heap has not provided a serious response to our latest SSA offer, we felt it was important to state publicly and transparently how we will go about navigating some of the most contentious issues between our respective offices so that we can ensure elections run smoothly and securely for Maricopa County voters. That was Board Chair Kate Brophy McGee. However, the following week, board members sent a letter to Heap with their proposed early voting plan, despite already giving him full control over it. The Board of Supervisors strongly supports maintaining a comprehensive early in-person program consistent with prior practices, the letter stated. Well, Heap responded to the letter. He said he had serious concerns about the board's early voting plan. He said the proposal makes voting inconvenient and inaccessible for a large number of Maricopa County voters. So he told the board he rejected their proposal. Why? Because Arizona law expressly authorizes the recorder to establish early voting locations. Well, of course, the Board of Supervisors did not like that, and they are still feuding. Perhaps now that the FBI is taking a look into all of these irregularities, something else will be done. Well, let's go ahead and actually hear from John Solomon. He's got just a little bit of insight as to what led to the FBI seeking this grand jury warrant and the investigation beginning.
The focus in this grand jury subpoena that went in the last few days to Maricopa County seized many gigabytes of election data is the 2024 election, which is interesting because President Trump won there. But there is a discovery that was made by congressional observers. Every year, the House Administration Committee sends observers, one Democrat, one Republican, to various voting centers. One of the teams, the Republican-Democrat team that went to Maricopa County, observed something very disturbing. They took pictures. They wrote a long report. Congressman Abe Hamadeh hinted at this in an oversight letter recently. The information in that report was so troubling to the FBI, and when coupled to the things that the Arizona Senate found in 2020 that were raised as concerns, and the things that Hamadeh and Kari Lake raised in 2022, they were able to get a grand jury subpoena from a federal grand jury and execute the transmission of a large amount of voter data. They're going to go through that data, looking for some of the telltale signs that were in this congressional report. I hope in the next couple of days to make that congressional report public so everybody can see what it was that observers on Brian Stiles' House Administration Committee saw. Brian Stiles himself acknowledged that they were working with federal authorities on this specific Arizona matter. So you got Congress working with the FBI. And I think this is phase 2 of about a 5-phase look at states, particularly blue states or blue areas of states where elections are not administered the way the law says they're supposed to be. And as a result, the FBI may come in and prosecute people because it is a federal felony if you don't follow your state's laws, if you don't treat everybody the same under your state law. So that's where we're at today.
This is me right now. Let me see. Media source. This is me right now, just standing back, watching the FBI move in on Maricopa County, rubbing my hands. Oh, baby, I cannot wait to see where this lands. And I can't wait to see which state they go to next. If I had to make a prediction, I'm going to say Michigan. Michigan is probably next. Now, here's the thing. President Trump has done a lot for the state of Michigan. And, of course, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who's on her way out, and a couple of her lackeys, the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, they are basically co-conspirators in the election crimes there. President Trump might do a little solid for Gretchen Whitmer. Or he may just tell her she's just going to have to deal with the fallout of the situation she and her girls created there. Because it's not going to matter a damn if the FBI has a grand jury subpoena to come on in there and do whatever they want to get that election-related information. So the FBI was highly disturbed by the information they learned. Now, we also have an update on some of the information that the FBI was able to take. These official Arizona state records also include high-definition front and back images of all 2.1 million 2020 Maricopa County election ballots, all of their logbooks detailing ballot issues, including non-conforming, that means illegal ballot papers that were used, and the statistically improbable ballot vote patterns. So they are going granular, and they're looking into so many things that we've talked about over the last 5 years. I am excited. Now, you also might want to take a look at this. We're going to read through it. The FBI is reportedly investigating one of the most infamous 2020 Arizona election fraud affidavits ever filed. You can tuck this away in your files because it may become very relevant in the very near future. Now, this is a redacted affidavit from a Phoenix resort hotel. The affiant says, I noticed there was a sign up. They were hiring people to work for $21 an hour. I asked some of the resort workers about this, and I was told they were recruiting workers for voter registration. Look at that. During their time there, I observed people constantly moving in and out of the ballrooms, and they were moving boxes back and forth in and out. The ballrooms were filled with computers and workers and boxes of voting ballots. One day, there was a Federal Express package at the desk for them, and I delivered it to the ballroom. No one was there, so I went in looking for someone. When I went into the ballroom with the package, I saw voting ballots loaded in bins. The room was filled with them. I was approached by a redacted worker. That may be the name of the company that was running this ballot fraud scheme. And they told me I was not allowed to be in there. I told them I was bringing them a package. They took the package and told me to leave. These were the same boxes that they were wheeling in and out the whole time. I then found out they were hiring workers from Arizona to drive to Georgia and work there. Isn't that interesting? I wonder if maybe this might have been a site that was being run by Runback Election Services. I don't know, just throwing it out there. Also, the redacted group was working strange hours. They were coming in extra early and parking with impunity, not following any of the rules. I went to Redacted and asked him about this group and the activities that were going on there, and he just ignored me. I asked some of the resort workers about them and was met with silence. No one wanted to talk or get involved. Question: what were feelings based on these observations? Answer: based on my experience in investigations and what I knew about the presidential election, I believed that this was election fraud and ballot harvesting. Question: what else did you do? Answer: I made a phone call to Congresswoman Debbie Lesko. She's the Congresswoman for Surprise, Arizona. I wanted to forward the information on to her. I spoke to her staffer, who was not interested in what I had to say. The staffer told me the Congresswoman or someone else would get back to me, but they never did. Then I placed a phone call to Redacted because I knew he was working on the Georgia election and forwarded the information on to him. Question: you said based on your experience in the field of investigations that you think this was a ballot harvesting and election fraud. Can you tell me, have you ever testified to that in court, or have you ever testified in court? Yes. Question: have you ever testified as an expert witness in court? Yes. Approximately how many times? Answer: I've testified hundreds of times as an expert witness. I've testified in federal, state, and municipal court, all as an expert witness in police criminal investigations. So this person is not some random bellboy who just happens to be showing up at this resort hotel. This is a person with credentials, with bona fides, and he knew exactly what it was when he saw it. He knew election fraud. He knew ballot harvesting when he was there. Very, very, very excited about this. I'll drop a heart right there for them. All right. Now, if you'll also remember a guest I had on the show many years ago, Melissa Carone, who was working for Dominion Voting Systems at the TCF Center in Detroit. TCF Center is famous because they shut all of the Republican observers out. They covered the windows with pizza boxes, and then they figured out how to produce enough ballots to give Joe Biden the race. Melissa Carone was there. She saw the whole thing going down. She saw the ballots coming in after hours through the back door. It was quite clear that there was a fraudulent operation going on there. Now, Melissa was a guest on my show shortly after the 2020 election. She came forward and she was scheduled to go on Hannity. Hannity ditched her at the last minute. And so she called me back because we had already spoken. And then Hannity called her and she was like, oh, Zach, I want to come on your show, but I really think I should probably go on Hannity first. And I was like, I understand it. You know, it's a huge platform. If you have an opportunity to share the information there first and then come on my show, I'm totally cool with that. So then Sean Hannity drops her. And he says, sorry, Melissa, we're not going to talk about election fraud anymore. And so she calls me and she's like, I guess we're doing it. So that night I had her on the show and we talked about it. This was when I was still on Twitch. So like my video on Twitch got like 300,000 views because they embedded it in a bunch of different articles and stuff. And the thing that sucks about Twitch, obviously, is that the videos don't stay forever. So it was gone within a couple of weeks. Really kind of a pisser, but you can still watch that interview with Melissa Carone on my Rumble or my Pilled channel. I think it's on Getter as well, but it's not on X because I was already deleted on X. But all of the main places where I'm still publishing today, you guys can go ahead and watch it. If you never saw it, I think you should because it's highly relevant right now. This is why I think Michigan is going to be the next state that we're going to see an FBI investigation openly acknowledged. Maybe it's time to have Melissa back on the show. We'll see what happens. All right. Now, we need to talk a little bit about the Shield of the Americas because the Shield of the Americas is what Kristi Noem will be transitioning over to on March 31st. As of March 31st, she will no longer be the Secretary of Homeland Security, and she's going to be taking over a much larger role. And these next couple of articles kind of define what the Shield of Americas is, what the job is that it's going to be doing. And then Kristi Noem actually gave a speech at the signing of the Shield of America's agreement between us and all of our partners here in the Western Hemisphere. And she talks about what she expects to see. So on March 3rd, so this is before the announcement of the Shield of Americas, the United States and Ecuador launched joint military operations specifically to target drug trafficking organizations that President Trump and the administration have already designated as FTO, foreign terrorist organizations. That includes a couple of different cartels known as Los Choneros and Los Lobos. Now, according to U.S. Southcom, American special forces are advising and supporting Ecuadorian commandos that are conducting the raids against these suspected drug facilities and trafficking sites across multiple provinces. Now, when the raid, when this action took place, we mentioned it briefly here on the show, but we didn't have any specific details about it. So I think it's pretty cool to be able to come back to it and now realize that it's part of this larger ongoing effort that has a name and has a structure. So U.S. personnel are providing planning assistance, intelligence, and logistical support, but it's believed that they are not directly participating in the raids. Of course, we don't know that for sure. They could just be telling us that we're not directly participating in it to make it safer for Americans on the ground in other places. Because if the cartels learn that the United States is offering more than just support in the background, that we're actually going in with these Ecuadorian commandos, that could put them at a significant risk level that perhaps they don't want to actually have to deal with. So the announcement included video of helicopters and aerial surveillance imagery, which became the start of a coordinated anti-cartel action there on the ground in Ecuador. Now, this deployment represents an expansion of U.S. anti-cartel operations from the maritime interdictions that we've seen in the Caribbean, now onto land targets, which is something President Trump and Pete Hegseth, Department of War, have spoken about for the last several months. Since September of 2025, U.S. Special Forces have carried out dozens of strikes on these suspected drug smuggling boats in the Caribbean. That is under Operation Southern Spear. And Ecuador has now become a key partner in these efforts under President Daniel Noboa, who has himself pursued a hardline security strategy to address the rising cartel violence and the out-of-control homicide rates that he sees in his country. Now, Ecuador is not a producer of cocaine, but it's a major transit hub for drugs that are originating in Colombia and Peru. So Noboa and the Ecuadorian people have welcomed this partnership with President Trump in the United States, saying it marks a new phase in the fight against drug trafficking and illegal mining as well. So their role as a transit hub and the Ecuadorian government's willingness to cooperate with America made it a natural entry point for the administration's more militarized approach to counter narcotics operations in the region. Now, this Ecuadorian operation was 4 days before President Trump hosted the leaders from across Latin America and the Caribbean at Trump Doral in Miami on the 7th to launch the Shield of the Americas coalition. This was a summit convened as a direct alternative to the traditional Summit of the Americas. Once again, another global organization that President Trump has subverted and made unnecessary by creating his own, thereby forging a stronger partnership with our sister and brother nations here in our hemisphere. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Kristi Noem hosted the leaders from these 12 nations. That included Argentina, El Salvador, Ecuador, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Panama, Paraguay, Honduras, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Bolivia, and Chile. Now, Mexico, Brazil, and Colombia, the region's three largest powers, did not attend, which seems to signal that there may be a divide in this coalition between the United States and the larger regional partners. Those also have more left-leaning governments. I was a little bit surprised that Colombia didn't show up. Of course, Mexico is basically a narco state at this point, and they are not too happy about the things that we've done. We've essentially forced them into handing cartel bosses over to us, and it's put some strain on their relationship with their people. Brazil is obviously a communist-run nation at this point, highly corrupt, and it looks like the people are probably going to be dispatching with their current president, Lula da Silva, later on this year, because elections are going to be coming. That's if everything is free and fair. So at the conclusion of the summit, the participating nations all signed the Doral Charter, which is the establishment of the America's Counter-Cartel Coalition. The attendees included the Argentine President Javier Milei, Nayib Bukele, El Salvador's president, Ecuador's Noboa, Chilean president Jose Antonio Costa, several of whom have already kind of gotten on board. They believe in President Trump and also Nayib Bukele's hardline stance on crime and migration. But the three main targets of this group are going to be transnational cartels, foreign encroachment. That means nations coming in our sphere of influence. We don't want that. And, of course, mass migration. Now, President Trump told the attending leaders that military force was necessary to destroy gangs like Tren de Aragua and MS-13, and he indicated, hey, the United States could strike cartel leaders with missiles if partner nations required assistance. It was actually a pretty based moment. Let me play that clip for you. And you know what? I think actually that may be in the next article. So let me jump over to that. And I will pull that up. Okay, here it is.
That's why together we're also forming the Shield of Americas, a new organization to advance these shared priorities in our hemisphere. For decades, leaders in this region have allowed large swaths of territory in the Western Hemisphere to come under the direct control and transnational gangs have taken over and they've run areas of your country. We're not going to let that happen. We'll help you. And bloodthirsty cartels that impose their will through murder, torture, extortion, drug trafficking, bribery, and terror. And some of you are in danger. I mean, you're actually in danger. It's hard to believe. But we're working with you to do whatever we have to do. We'll use missiles. If you want us to use a missile, they're extremely accurate. Boom. Right into the living room. That's the end of that cartel person. But we'll do whatever you need if you want. A lot of countries don't want to do that. They say, oh, sure, I'd rather not have that. I'd rather not have that. I believe they can be spoken to. I don't think so. Many of them don't want, and that's okay, too. You're going to do you. But if you need help,
you're going to do you.
Let us know, okay? Many of the cartels have developed sophisticated military operations, highly sophisticated. In some cases, they say they're more powerful than the military in the country. We can't have that. These brutal criminal organizations pose an unacceptable threat to national security, and they provide a dangerous gateway for foreign adversaries in our region. And we don't want them near our country either. We don't want them to come in. They're cancer, you know. They're cancer, and we don't want it spreading.
Based. Absolutely love it. All right. We also have here the signing of the documents. This represents a new partnership between the countries of the Americas, the Western Hemisphere. It solidifies the influence of the United States in all of these countries. This is the closest we have ever come to eradicating the scourge of drug trafficking, human trafficking, weapons trafficking, transnational criminal narco organizations. We're literally subverting the traditional power dynamic that has for decades ruled not only the Western Hemisphere, but the entire world. And this is the seat of power for the deep state. Because all of these criminal elements, at the end of the day, go to fund the destruction of not only the United States of America, but now every single one of our partner nations as well. Every single one of these criminal elements funds the terror, the death, the lawlessness, the crime that you see present in any of these countries. And the safer each of these countries get, the easier it's going to be for all of us to get along and have safety and security. No, South Africa is not at the signing because they're not part of the Western Hemisphere. That's in Africa, and we're talking about the Americas right here, which would be North and South America and Central America. All right. Now, during the meeting, President Trump directly laid into that idea of missiles, of military force. He said, the only way to defeat these enemies is by unleashing the power of our militaries. We have to use our military. We have to use our military. And prior to the signing, at Trump Doral, Trump lauded that the coalition is a commitment to using lethal military force to destroy the sinister cartels and terrorist networks. And he hailed the U.S. military's amazing weaponry and said that Latin American countries only need to identify the location of cartel operatives. So we are going in and we are going hard. Let me say thank you very much once again to ZBM. Also, thank you so much to Seanjo for a can. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cookies. Thank you, sir. Delia says the guy doing signature verification was doing that in 2022, not in 2020. So the affidavit was taken in. Are you talking about the affidavit that I read from Rasmussen? Because that affidavit was taken in 2021. So that was before 2022. There are probably many different similar ones that are going to be investigated, but that was just one that I had. Sean Joe, thank you for the cookie. Hogleg, thank you for the cookie. Moon Baby says, I'm here for the news. Thanks, Zach. Thank you for that. Filter Dog says, I don't want to brag, but no other president could do some of the shit I'm doing. Did President Trump actually say that? Brubark says in Marvel Comics, the SHIELD acronym stands for Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement and Logistics Division. Does Kristi Noem equal Nick Fury? Well, in this instance, I think she does. And Sean Joe, thank you for the cookie as well. All right, now we're going to listen to Kristi Noem and her speech at this event, where she directly discusses her new role.
Economic prosperity that blesses all of our people.
And actually, I didn't realize it was 15 minutes. So I'll go through the highlights here. So this is a pretty big transition. And I think that there's a number of ways you can look at it. I said earlier, it seems to be more of a lateral move than a demotion. Of course, it's no longer a cabinet level position, but Kristi Noem will be working directly with all of these countries, and she'll be in charge of essentially stopping cartels, trafficking drugs and people and weapons. So it really is a very important and honorable position for her to have. It could just be that, she and others were not getting along in the way that they needed to. And President Trump, of course, wants to put people where their strengths are going to be better suited. She said, I want to thank the president for creating this and giving me the honor and the opportunity to serve as a special envoy to this region, to the Western Hemisphere. And the Shield of the Americas initiative will strengthen cooperation between the United States and all other nations in Latin America. We'll be focusing heavily on security coordination, targeting cartels, of course, foreign criminal organizations, and the hostile influences that up until this point have been allowed to lawlessly operate within the Western Hemisphere. You can't have economic progress without security, she said. And I keep going back to that because economic progress is how President Trump ushers in peace, prosperity, and the golden age. Every single move that he makes, every deal that he makes, every piece of legislation that he wants to sign, every agreement that he signs with another nation, at the heart of it is the economic cooperation that binds nations and gives them a reason to maintain those peaceful cooperative moments. By adding that security element, we then have an opportunity to create economic prosperity that blesses all of our people. The summit brought together all those cabinet members and international leaders. Also, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was there. He will be working, of course, directly with Kristi Noem. He introduced her, and he emphasized the importance of the partnership between all of these Western Hemisphere nations. He also explained that the initiative is not intended to be a symbolic diplomatic forum. So this is not some easy assignment that Kristi Noem is being given or that Marco Rubio is taking part in either. Marco is the busiest man in this administration. This is not just going to be something where we meet once a year and you put out a paper. He said, we want this to be an issue of action. He said Noem is going to be serving as the central coordinator for this program, maintaining direct contact with leaders across the region and ensuring this coalition moves forward with operational cooperation against shared threats. Noem used her time at the podium to speak on the highlight that the Trump administration's record on border security has been successful during her tenure as Secretary of Homeland Security, pointing out the dramatic shift after President Trump returned to office. In the last year as Secretary of Homeland Security, we focused on securing our border. We transformed our country from one that was being invaded by enemies, millions of them coming in unvetted, to one that finally has a secure border. Now, according to Noem, these are figures we've heard before, but more than 3 million illegal immigrants have been deported or removed since we began intensified enforcement operations. Secure borders have changed everything for our country. With the border crisis largely under control, the administration now plans to expand their focus beyond U.S. territory by helping these partner nations to strengthen their own security. And cartels, terrorist organizations, these organizations that have been destabilizing these governments through the flow of human traffic, through the flow of fentanyl, a number of other narcotics like cocaine and even marijuana, bringing them through these nations into the United States of America creates a home base for these terrorist groups. Our objectives are going to be to destroy the cartels, Noem said. We're going after these narco-terrorists who are destroying our people and killing our children and our grandchildren. Also, don't forget that if it wasn't for the intervention of the Central Intelligence Agency, as it is with so many terrorist groups throughout the world. If it wasn't for them and the cooperating agreements they have, sharing money and routes and allowing drugs and people to be smuggled, these cartels would not have become as powerful as they are. So this is not simply an operation to take down some random drug cartel. This is an operation to take down the money source for the corrupt intel communities and for the deep state. They're going to focus on blocking hostile foreign influence in the region. Another big thing Trump administration has repeatedly raised regarding Chinese and other adversarial investments in Latin American infrastructure, technology, and strategic industries. Another central component will be migration enforcement, of course. Our hemisphere should be safer, more sovereign, and more prosperous. Noem also pointed to several nations that are already working closely with the United States, such as El Salvador, Ecuador, Argentina, and Chile. And she praised the criminal crackdown in El Salvador, essentially eliminating gang violence and random murders in the street, showing that this is possible. You just got to have the will to do it. And we've already jointly expanded security operations across a number of places in South America, including the efforts we mentioned to combat cartel activity and drug trafficking networks that have been operating in some previously inaccessible regions like mountains and rainforests. Officials involved in the summit emphasized that the initiative is meant to create a unified regional front against organized crime and terrorism. And despite the so-called controversy around Noem's departure from the DHS, her appearance along with the administration and her placement in such a key position, despite all of that, I think it shows that President Trump still maintains quite a level of confidence in her and her abilities. All right, now, before we move on to the next portion of today's show, I do have another brief message from our friends over here on Rumble. I got a little inside scoop for you guys that many creators are talking about behind the scenes. It's actually one of the many reasons that I'm here publishing on Rumble. They've made a way for people to super chat creators so that we get paid immediately and without any fees. And YouTube and Twitch, oftentimes, they're going to be taking up to 50% of the fees when you tip creators. This method takes absolutely none. This platform takes zero fees, and I keep just about 100% of what you guys send me. So you can super chat with either Bitcoin, Tether USD, or even Tether Gold stablecoins. And that tip shows up directly on the Rumble chat, which of course I'm going to go ahead and read if you have a special message. All you need to do is download the Rumble Wallet app on your app store and then send your tips to your favorite creators. Doesn't even have to be me. You guys can use it and it will help out anybody that you want to support. You can also just go to wallet.rumble.com or you can download the app directly from the App Store. You can use that QR code that you see on screen as well. Seriously, it's an amazing way to get rid of the middleman. You don't have to give any money to the banks and you can help fund the creator economy. So a big shout out to Rumble for making this awesome and disruptive technology. Thanks again to Rumble. All right, Mokanon says, real bummer Bolsonaro could have been there. Would have been almost every country in Central South America. Yes. Like I said, I think that Lula da Silva is not going to be in charge of Brazil in the very near future. And hopefully the person that comes in is going to get rid of all the crap that's been happening to Bolsonaro. They have completely pursued that guy just like they did to Donald Trump and his allies. It is a really, really disgusting thing. All right, we are going to continue our conversation about election security. And my friends at Unite for Freedom have posted this information about a private citizen's complaint in Missouri. Now, this complaint was attempted to be stonewalled by the Secretary of State's office in a direct attempt to circumvent federal law. But a federal judge has ruled that the state of Missouri must allow a voter's federal election complaint based upon analysis by Unite for Freedom. It's going to be allowed to proceed under the Help America Vote Act, which orders the Missouri Secretary of State, forces them to accept the complaint, and then they also must conduct a formal hearing and issue a written determination within 90 days. So the decision comes after the state had previously rejected this complaint based on a Missouri regulation requiring complaints to be filed within 30 days of election certification. However, The court ruled that state procedural rules cannot be used to block federally protected rights that are established by Congress under the Help America Vote Act. So the court's order requires the Secretary of State to process this complaint through the federal HAVA complaint procedure, including a hearing on the record and a written determination. The court also ordered preservation of key election system records while the complaint is being investigated. That includes statewide voter registration database records, voter history records, audit logs, and related election system data. Obviously, these records are going to be relevant to determining whether or not election systems are operating in compliance with federal requirements. I think we're probably going to find most likely they are not. Importantly, the court also stated the plaintiff has obtained the full relief requested in the complaint and that the court will retain jurisdiction for 90 days in order to ensure compliance with this order. So it's not like the Secretary of State's office is just going to be able to say, sure, we'll take care of it, and then 90 days go by and they do nothing, and then they say, we found nothing, go on about your business. Now, here is the actual complaint. So this Help America Vote Act complaint filed by this plaintiff centers around a pretty simple analysis of Unite for Freedom's election validity scorecard. It demonstrates the state's certified vote tallies from 2022 and 2024 did not match the EAC vote tally or the state's own voter history records. So HAVA requires each state to implement a single, uniform, official, centralized, interactive, computerized, statewide voter registration list. It has to be maintained at the state level with a unique identifier for each single legally registered voter. It also further requires that this single statewide list serve as the official list for the conduct of all federal elections in the state. If there are different official channels that produce different totals for the same election, then the state is not operating off of one of these authoritative lists. So the ruling does not determine whether any election laws were actually violated, but instead, the case is about ensuring that federal election law is followed. Connie Kramer is the plaintiff in this case. She said Congress created a process under HAVA so that citizens can raise concerns about election administration and receive a formal hearing and a determination. The court confirmed that states cannot block that federal process with procedural technicalities. So the court also emphasized the ruling does not address the underlying merits of the allegations, but ensures that the federally required process gets to occur. This ruling reinforces a simple principle, she said. Federal election law applies to every state. When Congress created a complaint process for violations of HAVA, it meant for that process to be accessible to citizens. Now, while the decision applies directly to Missouri, the ruling carries potential national implications because the Help America Vote Act establishes uniform federal requirements for election administration across all 50 states. Legal observers note the decision reinforces several key principles of federal election law. Number one, citizens have the right to file complaints under federal HAVA complaint process. Number two, states cannot use procedural rules to deny access to federally mandated complaint procedures. Number three, courts may enforce the federal complaint process when states refuse to provide it. And number four, election system records may be preserved and examined when compliance with federal election law is questioned. So because every state that receives federal funding under HAVA must comply with this requirement, the reasoning in the ruling may be cited in future cases involving election administration and access to the federal complaint process. So the extent of this ruling may reach out far and wide, far beyond the boundaries of the state of Missouri. So the ruling will be used in citizen complaints going forward. They're going to refer back to this case. Remember back in 2020, they told us nobody had any standing. Well, now this ruling is going to be used as precedent in future citizen complaints against states who violate their civil rights for a free and fair election. I wanted to say thank you to Unite for Freedom for officially helping out with this and helping people recognize that there is a pathway forward. Now, Unite for Freedom has also commented on the situation that we talked about with Harry Horry the other day here on the program. So they say analysis of Texas primary election data. This is pretty staggering. We shifted our release plan late last night because the ongoing peer review of Texas early voting data has yielded significant findings regarding ballot discrepancies. Initial analysis indicates instances of ballot injections and deletions that surpass the current margin of victory in several key contests. So these are the discrepancies they have identified. Approximately 50,000 ballots are currently flagged as having been injected. The scope of the impact would be in multiple races, including a Senate seat and several congressional seats. And all of them are currently decided by margins of 40,000 votes or less. Comparative context, while the raw numbers of flagged ballots is lower than those identified in the 2024 general election analysis, the impact is mathematically more significant due to the lower participation rates of primary elections. So their conclusion is that the magnitude of this finding is critically high because primary elections have a lower total vote count than general elections. A discrepancy of 50,000 ballots exerts a disproportionate amount of leverage over the final results. So in this specific case, the volume of irregular ballots, 50,000, mathematically offsets the narrow margins, 40,000, in high-stakes Senate and congressional races, and that suggests that the identified discrepancies are large enough to have potentially altered the selection of candidates moving forward to the general election ballot. You can bet that this is an ongoing investigation, and Unite for Freedom is not simply going to allow it to go by the wayside. Let me say thank you to V Marks, who says, I love your laugh, Zak. You are the best. Thank you for that. I appreciate you. Let me also say thank you very much to Sean Joe for the cookie. Thank you to No Thanks Joe for the cookie. Hey, Lisa and Zak, I hope you guys had a great weekend, and I look forward to the new stuff this week. God bless. Stay safe. Thank you very much for that. Sean Joe, thank you for the cookie. And Darla says, thanks again, Zak. Always on point. Great job reporting. One day, you'll be MSM. Lisa is going to be rich. LOL. I don't think so. But thank you for your confidence in me. If people would just listen and share my show, then I'd be happy. I don't need to be on Fox News or CNN or anything like that. All right, so we do have an update on the situation with Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, an imperfect man, as they all are, but still, he's been a rather good ally for President Trump in the Senate. There are apparently 5 potential candidates that the governor is looking at as his replacement. So, let me jump to them. All right, so the Oklahoma law says that Governor Kevin Stitt will have 30 days to appoint a temporary U.S. senator to fill the vacancy until voters decide the winner in the next election. So the appointee will serve only briefly, and they're expected to sign an oath promising not to run for the seat in the upcoming election. That's a measure designed to prevent the advantages of incumbency in the race. So some of the people that are being considered. First, you have U.S. Representative Kevin Hern. Hern represents Oklahoma's 1st congressional district, and he's also the chair of the Republican Study Committee. You also have Dustin Hillary, a senior advisor to Governor Stitt. He's a communications executive and a CEO of a telecommunications company. He doesn't seem like he has the political bona fides to take on this position, so not sure why he's on the list. We've also got Harold Hamm, the founder of Continental Resources and a prominent oil executive. Hamm also reportedly contacted Governor Stitt to express interest in the appointment. Of course, he did. John O'Connor is the former Oklahoma Attorney General. He was previously appointed by Stitt in 2021 to fill another unexpired term. You have Nathan Dahm, former chair of the Oklahoma Republican Party and current state senator. David Ostro, the chief operating officer in the governor's office. That one's another one that's a little too close to the governor. Not exactly certain why he would be on there. Alex Gray, a former National Security Council official who ran for Senate in 2022. Bond Payne, the governor's former chief of staff. That's another one, little too close for comfort for me. And then Matt Pinnell, the current lieutenant governor of Oklahoma, though his office has stated he is evaluating all options for his future service. We also have T.W. Shannon, a former Oklahoma House Speaker. Shannon is a prominent conservative figure and also a member of the Chickasaw Nation. He is frequently mentioned. Shannon previously ran for the Senate. Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell, we just spoke about him, and then Representative Stephanie Bice. She's another possible contender, Republican from Oklahoma City. Bice flipped her congressional district in 2020 and has built a reputation as a reliable conservative voice in Washington. So, again, this is going to be a temporary appointment. Can't believe that anybody is going to give up an existing seat to take on a job that they're not going to have a couple of months down the road. But Oklahoma Republicans have signaled interest in running for the seat permanently in November of 2026, which means that people like Kevin Hern and Stephanie Bice, they're probably more likely to just run in the election at that time. Now, other Republicans have already filed paperwork to run for that open Senate seat. Someone named Nick Hankins, Ron Meinhardt, Tammy Swearingen, and Wayne Washington. So we'll see what happens, but I sure hope that the governor doesn't just pick somebody from his staff to take on this position. That's going to look a little bit too nepotistic for my taste. All right, now, President Trump has officially announced that he will not sign any other bills until the SAVE Act passes, and he has demanded 2 changes to the legislation. All right, so this appears to be an ultimate trump card that President Trump is using to put pressure on the Senate into finally passing the SAVE Act. Now, as I've stated before, the SAVE Act is not the end-all, be-all of election security, but it is, in my opinion, a necessary step that will put us on the path to ensure that elections will be secure. Many different things need to happen, but this is a great place to start. Now, as I've also stated, President Trump could just pass an executive order, make the wishes of the SAVE Act something that are in place before the 2026 midterms, and that would be it. However, it would immediately come under the attacks of left-wing lawfarers. It would also come under attack from future administrations. If a liberal is elected to the presidency again in the future, they could just cancel that executive order. If it's passed through the legislature, then it's now become law. And it's going to be something that will have to be unraveled that way, and you'll have to have enough votes to do it. So this is truly the way that it needs to be done. Now, currently, it's stated that they just don't have the votes to do it. All right. Allegedly, they have 50 votes, but because they have not signaled that they are willing to use the talking filibuster, that means that they're not going to be able to pass it with 60 votes. Now, President Trump said, I, as president, will not sign any other bills until this is passed, and not the watered-down version. Go for the gold. Must show voter ID and proof of citizenship. No mail-in ballots except for military, illness, disability, travel. No men and women's sports. And no transgender mutilization for children. Do not fail. Mutilization. Children do not fail. This, of course, is being attacked by the left. Chuck Schumer says that the SAVE Act is Jim Crow 2.0. It would disenfranchise tens of millions of people. If Trump is saying he won't sign any more bills until the SAVE Act is passed, then so be it. There will be total gridlock in the Senate, which means that Chuck Schumer is totally fine not allowing anything to happen for the rest of Trump's presidency. And, of course, that's going to be a major problem. Now, we know that, as I reported last week, Ken Paxton has agreed to step down if John Cornyn agrees to use the talking filibuster and get the SAVE Act passed for President Trump's endorsement. And now John Cornyn is demanding that the SAVE Act be passed and that they use the talking filibuster to do it. It's funny. Ken Paxton was like, wow, I made John Cornyn more conservative in the last 3 days than he's been in the years that he's been in the Senate. Thought it was pretty funny. But to this point, none of that has happened. Now, if the Senate is unsuccessful in passing the SAVE Act, President Trump is not going to endorse John Cornyn or anybody else. There's also some speculation that John Cornyn may be among those on the list of Congress people who were forced to use the taxpayer-funded settlement fund to pay off a staffer that he sexually assaulted or sexually abused or maybe just, made a pass at or something like that. But it's supposed to be a man. Now, I don't know that that's the case, but this is the rumor that's going around. And so Republicans in the Senate and the National Republican Senatorial Committee are also apparently now very nervous about the fact that John Cornyn may be exposed for having been one of those people who benefited from this taxpayer-funded fund. We'll see what happens, but there is still a long way to go. Now, Anna Paulina Luna is also playing a bit of hardball herself. She says that she plans to block the passage of the so-called must-pass Pfizer reauthorization unless the Save America Act is attached. Of course, everybody knows that the 702 reauthorization is about to come up, and the FBI is going to tell Congress that we have to have FISA passed, especially now that we've got homegrown terrorists that are throwing bombs in New York City. I don't know that that has anything to do with it, but gosh, isn't it an interesting time for that to be happening right now as the FISA reauthorization is coming up. But this would be a way for Congress to get the SAVE Act passed if they were to force the attaching of the Save America Act to the FISA reauthorization. Anna Paulina Luna says she is not going to vote for the FISA reauthorization unless it's attached. And I tend to believe that they will be able to get more than a couple of people on board to make sure that that happens. Because, of course, President Trump says he's not going to sign anything anyways. But if he signs the FISA reauthorization and the SAVE Act is connected to it, then bingo, bango, bongo, you got it. You are all good. Hey, would you blow me too? Says a person's faith should be like their sexuality. Keep it to your effing self. You're probably right about that. Now, we also have a new announcement coming from the Small Business Association. This is actually an announcement that had been signaled some time ago, reported on it at the time, but now Kelly Loeffler has announced that it has actually taken effect. We have a new policy at the Small Business Association. No foreign nationals and no non-citizens are going to be allowed to receive loans. And that means that the SBA is only going to be prioritizing American citizens. I actually had this clip pulled up on Friday, but I was unable to play it because we were so busy. So let me see this. Oh, I guess that the clip isn't in here. All right, so Kelly Loeffler put out a statement, and she said the Trump SBA is committed to driving economic growth and job creation for American citizens, not for foreign nationals. Last month, we made it clear that SBA would not allow foreign nationals to access our core small business loans program. And today, we are expanding that policy to include all SBA guaranteed loans. With our lending authority capped annually by Congress and amid record demand for access to capital, our responsibility is clear. The limited resources of the SBA financing must prioritize American citizens who are building businesses and creating jobs here at home. So effective March 1st, the SBA requires that 100% of all direct and indirect owners of a small business applying for SBA financing must be American citizens or U.S. nationals with their principal residence in the United States, its territories, or possessions. The new policy eliminates any foreign ownership, even a small percentage, such as the previous allowance of up to 5% in some cases, and it explicitly bars legal permanent residents like green card holders or LPRs from holding any ownership interest in an applicant or borrower business. In a press release, the agency stated today, in the effort to prioritize American job creators, the U.S. Small Business Administration issued this new policy notice to ban foreign nationals and non-citizens from accessing SBA-guaranteed small business loans. The latest notice, which applies to the agency's surety bond and microloan programs, builds on the policy change implemented earlier this month, which make any small business owner in whole or in part by a foreign national ineligible for the agency's flagship 504 and 7A loan programs. Small business owners applying for any SBA loan program must be a U.S. citizen or U.S. nationals with their principal residence in the United States of America. Now, in case you're a small business owner and you're thinking, gosh, maybe I could benefit from this, the answer is yes, you can. And it's even more likely that you will be able to benefit from this because the competition just got a lot less. So the requirement will apply to that surety bond and microloan program in an expansion of these changes that first began back in February. Small businesses looking to finance working capital, equipment, or acquisitions. Those earlier reforms prohibited SBA loans from going to any business that would be partially owned or wholly owned by foreign nationals. But the surety bond helps new or inexperienced contractors bid for government jobs that require surety bonding. Similarly, the microloan program looks to offer small business loans for up to $50,000 through approved third-party intermediaries. The SBA under President Trump is also still actively looking to root out fraud, and they are directing funds towards American citizens and making it their priority. We know back in January, Loeffler said the agency had discovered, following a review of PPP and economic injury disaster loan approvals in Minnesota, there were nearly $400 million in potentially fraudulent loans, money that was supposed to keep small businesses afloat and American workers employed during the pandemic. Loeffler said the agency reviewed thousands of pandemic-era loans approved in Minnesota. They identified 7,900 PPP and EIDL loans connected to the suspended borrowers and suspected 6,900 Minnesota borrowers after uncovering the suspected fraud. And in February, they suspended 111,620 California borrowers connected to $8.6 billion in suspected pandemic fraud. So we continue to soldier on and find the fraud where it may be. Now, we are going to transition to today's segment on the Epstein files. Now, over the weekend, Margot Cleveland dug this up. The Chelsea Clinton wedding invitation list has been discovered, and it turns out that Ghislaine Maxwell was indeed a +1 at the wedding. The invited guest who brought her was O.J. Simpson. Now, listen to this. So I retweeted it, and I said, although this absolves Hillary of perjury in the instance of this answer, I'm not sure it's any better indication of the famous Clinton morality index, because you're the +1 of O.J. Simpson. At this point, O.J. Simpson pretty much was accepted as the man who likely murdered his ex-wife and her friend and the guy that was working at the restaurant she liked to go to, Ronald Goldman. But Pamela McKenzie pointed out under the tweet here that the wedding was on July 31st of 2010. And guess what? O.J. Simpson was in prison on July 31st of 2010. Also, Blue Demon pointed that out as well. So if O.J. Simpson was in prison on July 31st of 2010, that means that Ghislaine Maxwell did not come to the wedding with O.J. Simpson. That sounds to me like Ghislaine Maxwell was invited as the +1 of a man they knew were not going to be coming to the wedding because the dude was freaking in prison. Remember, he robbed some people of O.J. Simpson memorabilia, and he didn't get out of prison until 2017. So O.J. Simpson may have been the official guest on the guest list, but I think that it was only that way so that Ghislaine Maxwell would not be the official guest on the guest list. Of course, she had to come because she and the Clintons were so damn close. Now, let's also take a look at this. Now, it turns out that after Jeffrey Epstein died, there were a number of ongoing investigations. We know the SDNY was looking into a number of things. Of course, they told the authorities in New Mexico that they were going to take over the Zorro Ranch investigation, and then they just killed it. They buried it. That was Maureen Comey, the daughter of James Comey. But the FBI continued to work on this in New York, and we can see here that there were a number of other cases that they had already planned to indict co-conspirators that were not Ghislaine Maxwell. In this email from August 25th of 2019, the New York FBI sends an email to a bunch of other New York FBI agents, subject Epstein updates, all after much engagement with HQ over the past 48 hours and our efforts to both consolidate and limit the reporting requirements, HQ is now requesting updates in a conference call to be held today at 15:30. You should all receive the bridge line information tomorrow. Trust me, nothing you're thinking right now hasn't already been communicated to the highest levels. In my opinion, this is largely driven by DOJ. Is it inconvenient? Yes. Regardless, we'll need to support the calls because those you all deal with in CID are in the exact same position as you. We should support each other and push through. Now, based on my calls with HQ, here are some of my thoughts on how we should go forward. Many questions I'm receiving are driven by media reporting, e.g. Maxwell, New Mexico, residents, search, etc. If you see sustained reporting on one aspect, get ahead of it. For example, the media has been all over the location and role of Maxwell as a co-conspirator. I advise that based on the volume and quality of evidence we have, the team is currently focused on charges for a different co-conspirator. However, we're engaged with counsel for all co-conspirators. How many were there? Kill the rumor before it gets legs in the minds of senior leadership. With regard to interviews or other investigative techniques, stay general unless we have significant information. You could say, we conducted interviews of 14 MCC corrections officers and continued with the financial analysis, but don't have anything significant to report. Only give names of an interviewee if there was something significant. If we don't have significant results to report, it's okay to say so. Be mindful that most, if not all, of what you say will be pushed to the 7th floor. Now, I thought the 7th floor was disbanded during the first year of Trump's administration. It would appear that although that was an official act, they continued on despite the fact that they were not supposed to be doing this shit anymore. Tuesday is a big day with the hearing, so be prepared to be able to talk it on Monday and beyond. You can provide the approximate number of victims expected to attend and any efforts we have in making that happen, coordination, transportation, etc. On Tuesday, you'll give the readout of the hearing. In your reporting over the next few days and weeks, stay focused on the investigation of the co-conspirators and stay tight with SDNY on conversations you're having with counsel and the direction we're heading towards charges. Redacted, and on Wednesday, Redacted, I've continually expressed to HQ how C19 and C2 are tight on the drug sex case. Remember, there was that drug investigation that simply disappeared. You guys can speak together about that case. Clearly, we're focused on analysis of the phones as well as the nature and timing of likely charges. Redacted, I talked to Redacted, and I know that you guys have a couple of big interviews to do that will determine if the PC case has any legs or if it gets shut down. I would focus on advising of the timing of those interviews. Redacted, I've included you here, FYSA. I don't know what that means. For your self-awareness? I don't know. Let me know if you want the Bridgeline details as well. Enjoy your Sunday. That was from the New York Field Office Criminal Branch C. So obviously the investigations into co-conspirators was pretty far down the road, and there was the likelihood of that happening until someone, likely the SDNY, completely killed it. Now, continuing, we also have an Epstein victim who has been identified in a picture that was recently making the rounds online, and that would be Juliette Bryant. I've spoken about Juliette Bryant's case here on the channel before. She is on X, and she has spoken openly about being on the planes with Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein, having been trafficked on the island. Now, you can see here, this is the photograph that was going around. Apparently, the young woman in this photograph was in an ATV accident on Jeffrey Epstein's island. Jeffrey Epstein, she needed medical attention, and Jeffrey Epstein called one of his surgeons that was on retainer, apparently. And this surgeon shows up to Jeffrey Epstein's apartment in New York and operates on this woman. I guess she got 35 stitches in her head. You can see the pants that she's wearing right here. Well, this is Juliette Bryant, and these are those exact same pants. She has identified herself as the woman in that photograph getting stitches on Jeffrey Epstein's table. Now, this is particularly notable because there have been people who have doubted Juliette's story. Juliette is significantly damaged as a result of the trauma that she underwent. And so people have attempted to use that to disparage her and to say that they don't believe that she is truly a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. Well, I've been looking into Juliette's story for quite some time, and I already believed it. Now that we have this direct confirmation of this being Juliette, I'm going to say that it is highly likely that this is, in fact, her. Because there are other pictures that she has, and she has expressed a whole bunch of information about what she underwent as she was being trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein and the people around her. If you want to follow Juliette Bryant, she is listed right here, Epstein survivor, Juliette Bryant. I'm at Juliette Bryant right here. This is her. At Juliette Bryant, JulietteBryant. And you can find her right here on X. And definitely, I would say give her a follow. Okay. Now, we've also had another picture discovered of Jeffrey Epstein's best friend, Prince Andrew, sitting with a trafficking victim, cuddled up in his lap. He's got his arms wrapped around her like a lecherous old coot. And it turns out that his daughter, Eugenie, has been forced to resign from the charity that she worked at as a result of her father's disgusting behavior. So it's no longer paying to be a Mountbatten Windsor. He's being exiled to Sandringham Farm. He's also under criminal investigation as of right now. His daughters are probably not speaking to him. And we've got a new picture, which is definitely Prince Andrew. And he's got a victim of Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking sitting in his lap. So his daughter, Princess Eugenie, this is going to be an ironic one, has been forced to resign from her role in an anti-slavery charity as the fallout continues. She has served for 7 years as a patron of the Anti-Slavery International Organization. On Sunday, she stepped away from the role as the world's oldest human rights organization. The charity said in a statement, after 7 years, our patronage from Her Royal Highness Princess Eugenie of York has come to an end. We thank the princess very much for her support for Anti-Slavery International. We hope that she continues to work to end slavery for good and deliver freedom for everyone. Funny you should ask. That might also work. Okay. Thank you, G. Fontes. Also, we have another clip from Bill Clinton's testimony. This is a question asked by Representative Nancy Mace. Bill Clinton appears to be totally stunned when she asks him whether or not he likes them young. I can't remember if I played this or not, so I'm going to go ahead and do it.
Witnesses who testified in the Epstein cases that Epstein said, you quote, like them young. Why would Epstein say that about you?
Are you asking his opinion? You're asking him to think about why Mr. Epstein would say something about him?
Why would Epstein say that about
So she's asking
President?
you to try to be in Mr. Epstein's mind and guess at what Mr. Epstein would have thought about.
Clinton likes them young, referring to girls.
First of all, that's not true.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's true. I'm pretty sure it's true. And I think everybody here knows it's true. All right. Now, this was another huge reveal that came out over the weekend. You may remember former Metropolitan Correctional Officer Tova Noel. Well, Tova Noel was one of the prison guards working at the time that Jeffrey Epstein mysteriously shuffled off this mortal coil, or perhaps was merely shuffled out of the building. These newly released documents from the Justice Department are going to raise a lot of questions for a lot of people, or they may answer a lot of questions for a lot of people. Turns out that Tova Noel, one of those guards that was working at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, Googled Jeffrey Epstein's name just a few minutes before he was found allegedly deceased. And also, she is one of the people who slept on the job and shopped online at the time she was supposed to be watching him. So she Googled latest on Epstein in jail at 5:42 a.m. and then again at 5:52 a.m., 10 minutes later. That's less than 40 minutes before her colleague, Correctional Officer Michael Thomas, found Jeffrey Epstein, or whomever they placed as Jeffrey Epstein, in that cell hanging at around 6:30 a.m. Now, earlier in the shift, Miss Noel shopped for furniture online and then slept on the job. She was supposed to be making mandatory checks of Jeffrey Epstein every 30 minutes. And she also was, while she was sleeping, Officer Thomas was looking at motorcycles. Seems like they were both planning to make large purchases. That's interesting. Now, the FBI highlighted the eerie internet search in their 66-page forensic examination of the Bureau of Prisons desktop computers of Noel and Thomas. It was the only search that they highlighted. Now, Noel had previously admitted to falsifying records after Epstein died, but she was not charged thanks to the judge who lied and said she never Googled Epstein. She said, "I don't remember doing that," according to the FBI's transcript. She also said the FBI records were not accurate and said she did not recall looking him up. She also, and this is a little more damning, she also made a mysterious $5,000 deposit 10 days before his death. Of course, this was after other suspicious large cash deposits appeared in her Chase Bank account. Now, Chase Bank actually flagged these deposits into her account in a suspicious activity report to the FBI in November 2019. This was also part of these files that were released. There were a total of 12 deposits. They began in April of 2018, the bank said, and they culminated in that largest deposit for $5,000 on July 30th. Now, the files only contain Noel's bank records beginning in December of 2018, but they show 7 cash deposits totaling $11,880. As far as I know, she has never explained where that money came from. She started working at the special housing unit where Jeffrey Epstein was held beginning July 7th of 2019, just a couple of weeks before Epstein's death. Now, I don't know how much you get paid working as a corrections officer at the MCC. Let me look this up. Average MCC corrections officer salary. Okay, so you get paid hourly between $20 to $26 an hour. So let's split the difference. We'll say $23 an hour. 23 times 40 times 52. So that's $47,000 a year. But she was driving a $62,000 2019 Range Rover, brand new Range Rover. And apparently the DOJ never bothered to ask her about the cash, where it came from, or how she could afford a brand new Range Rover. Now, the insurance on that is not going to be cheap either. So she would have had a big payment on her car. That's easily an $800 a month or more payment on that car. And then the insurance, probably going to be a couple of $1,000s every few months. On another interesting note, an internal FBI briefing that was also uncovered in these DOJ files revealed the agency believed that Noel was the orange flash moving towards Epstein's cell on the night that he died. If you'll remember, when the new video came out recently, there was what appeared to be a flash of orange going up the stairs towards Epstein's cell. And we talked about it then. Only inmates wear orange. There's no way that a guard would have been wearing an inmate's clothing unless they were attempting to look like an inmate. There's no reason that they would have done it, except maybe if they were carrying orange bed sheets up to a cell or something like that. But either way, at approximately 10:40 p.m., a corrections officer they believe to be Tova Noel carried linen or inmate clothing up to the L tier. That's the last time any corrections officer approached the only entrance to the SHU where Jeffrey Epstein was. But Noel denies carrying any linens or any clothing up to Epstein's cell. She says that wasn't her job. Somebody else did that. And she's also now being sued by Westchester County Supreme Court for an alleged assault at her current job as a medical office assistant at Montefiore Einstein Advanced Care. She's a real Einstein, apparently. Wow, so she sounds like she may be a violent person. Interesting stuff, but either way you slice it, I don't trust this bitch at all. I don't trust either of those people. Her and Michael, what's his name? Michael Michael Thomas. Her and Michael Thomas, I think that they were both in on whatever happened that night, because there's simply no way. How you just going to go all night? You know you're supposed to check every 30 minutes on the most important prisoner in the entire nation, and instead you're just Googling on what people are thinking about him in jail, getting cash payments, driving a brand new Range Rover. Don't buy it. All right, now, David Copperfield recently ended his 25-year residency as a magician in Las Vegas. And that is likely because his name has come up quite a few times in the Epstein files. Here he is playing, bedtime with Ghislaine Maxwell. Also, in the documents released, shows that the FBI was looking into his predilection for minors. So the Epstein curse, it's like a stain that won't go away for some people, and magician David Copperfield is not going to be absolved. So last Thursday, he ended his 25-year residency on the Vegas Strip. Sin City, I guess, is just no longer good enough for him. Among the millions of documents in the Justice Department's drop on the Epstein files, there were a slew of FBI memos that mentioned David Copperfield. In one, agents discussed whether Copperfield and his longtime friend Jeffrey Epstein engaged in referring possible victims to each other, and whether they shared a predilection for minors. That memo was written in 2007. That was a year before Jeffrey Epstein cut a sweetheart plea deal with Florida law enforcement on charges of having sex with underage women. Females, rather, I should say. But Copperfield's name appears extensively in the Epstein files, referenced multiple times in FBI files up until the point that Jeffrey Epstein officially died in 2019. Copperfield is the latest Epstein associate to face fallout for his affiliation with the convicted pedophile, and that includes a list of many different people we've already spoken about. So David Copperfield appears to be a big creep, and for my next trick, I will make Jeffrey Epstein disappear. All right. Now, this will be our final message, or our final show, our final story. We have new documents also that have been released in Jean-Luc Brunel's European connection, a trafficking operation working with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, it would appear that we now have a better idea of how the tentacles of Epstein's trafficking ring spread around the world. And from these places, new revelations are arising nonstop. This disturbing new chapter in the Epstein saga emerges from France, where confidential court documents now reveal the scale of abuse orchestrated by so-called model scout and alleged serial rapist Jean-Luc Brunel. Brunel, as you all know, was a close associate of Jeffrey Epstein, and of course he met the same fate. He was suicided in his cell in Le Centre prison in France. These newly released documents show Brunel running an industrial system of exploitation, even transforming luxury castles and apartments into sites explicitly for abuse. The 30-page judicial order that was recently released, dating from 2023 and unseen until now, outlines how underage models were systematically exploited and sometimes sent to the United States for further abuse. That raises a lot of questions, how such a network could operate with total impunity. Or it answers questions about how such a network could operate with total impunity. The documents reveal a disturbing logistical operation. From grand castles in Normandy to upscale Parisian apartments, properties were specifically used to facilitate predation. Testimonies describe how victims were transported to isolated locations where the abuse took place, often during trips presented as professional modeling assignments. One former model recounted being taken to a small castle, assaulted, describing hidden passageways that allowed Brunel to orchestrate attacks without even being seen. These places, like castles, isolated the young victims in a pattern of abuse spanning over a decade. Agencies like Chlorine Models and MC2 allegedly served as talent pools for Brunel, where young women's careers were conditioned on submitting to sexual demands. Aspiring models were groomed, monitored, and coerced into compliance under the guise of professional advancement. Confiscated passports, ongoing pressure from powerful figures, and a network of international contacts reportedly enabled Brunel to operate without fear of prosecution for years. The documents illustrate how complicity was embedded in multiple layers of the modeling industry, allowing exploitation to continue largely unchecked. There were so many people who were engaging in this exact same type of behavior. There were so many people who were compromised as a result of being caught on film, video, having stories that might come out as a result of these poor girls that were being abused. Okay. And my mom just sent me a text of Melissa Carone. Yes. Yeah, that's from her hearing, Mom, back in 2022. Is that Melissa's actual account? No, that's not her account. This is somebody. Oh, maybe it is. I don't know. We'll see. All right, you guys. Let me go through these final thank yous over here. Let's see. Thank you to 123SKG for the can. And thank you to Sean Joe for the cookie. Do appreciate you guys. And I will have one final message from our friends over here on Rumble. And let me just bring this up, and then I will send you guys on your way. All right. It's a new era for America First International Assistance. President Trump has been clear. America won't hesitate to act, and we won't write blank checks. From now on, U.S. assistance will be strategic, accountable, and tied to results that make America safer and more secure. Strong borders, tougher enforcement, and real cooperation to stop illegal immigration and keep deadly drugs out of our communities. America First assistance will stabilize fragile regions before crises reach our shores, strengthening key partners and support American farmers, manufacturers, and workers. 80% of President Trump voters support such international assistance. And to Beijing, if you're using aid to buy influence and control, the game is changing. America will lead with strength, with purpose, and with conditions that put our security first. You can learn more about America First International Assistance using that QR code that you see on screen right there. Thank you very much to them, and thank you very much to Rumble. All right, you guys, tonight I will be joined by my buddy Josh on Baseless Conspiracies. We're going to be talking in depth about the Denver International Airport and a number of other subjects. John is out of town, so this is going to be a wholly different kind of conversation, speaking about baseless conspiracies, than you are probably used to, because Josh is highly knowledgeable about many of the subjects, probably all the subjects that I'm knowledgeable about as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. So if you want to join me tonight at 10:30 Eastern Time, please do so. Otherwise, I'll be back here tomorrow at 5 p.m. for another episode of Red Pill News Live. Let me pass out these gold pills, and I will send you all on your way. And I appreciate your support. Good luck, and God bless. Peace.